anything like that such. Death, taxes, and 85 will always go.
Welcome to New Stripe City, a podcast for die-hard Bengals fans. I'm your host, Ace Boogie. And as you guys already know, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're in the iTunes store. We're on Google Play. So make sure you check us out. That way you can always hear our information. But let's get into a couple of things. So as we know, last week the Bengals kicked off OTAs. But there are a few nuggets out there, so we'll touch on some things. But it's funny that I told you guys on Sunday on NSC Live that Drake Kirkpatrick had an injury. I was one of the first people, knowingly, I believe I was the first person to report it. Obviously, we see what's happened now, so we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll also touch on the offensive line, Cedric Ogbuehi. We'll touch base on some of the other options out there, some of the nuggets that are coming out, and then we'll talk about the fact that the Browns are having Bengals Hall of Famer Anthony Munoz actually acting as a coach for their linemen, and it just shocks me that the Bengals didn't even do that. Okay, so first let's just start off with that. So the Bengals have Hall of Famer, our only Hall of Famer. Unfortunately, Ken Anderson isn't in there, and a couple of other guys. I think Max Montoya is another guy that should be in there. But with all that aside, the Bengals didn't bring him in. I'm not sure, what happened exactly with that situation, but who better to have in camp right now than Anthony Munoz? It just kind of baffles me that we let the Browns actually bring him in as a coach before we did. Especially, given the fact that Big Whit left, Zeitler left, you got a lot of new guys on the line. I mean, obviously, Cedric Ogbuehi, Jake Fisher. It would be nice to have a guy like Munoz kind of, in a sense, be there to kind of help teach Ogbuehi some technique. I mean, obviously it was a position that the Bengals were kind of bad at last year, but it just kind of baffles me that he wasn't, in a sense, reached out to or invited to come to camp. Now, I'm not sure, I think last year Willie Anderson was there as a coach. It would have been cool for them to bring in Willie Anderson and Anthony Munoz, so Willie Anderson could kind of, in a sense, coach up Jake Fisher, and Anthony Munoz could have coached up Ogbuehi. Now, we have seen the Bengals in the past. I think a couple years ago, TJ Houshmandzadeh came out, did some coaching. But you would have thought that, some of these guys, especially given what transpired and all of our eggs being in one basket with Cedric Ogbuehi this year, you just would have thought that they would have reached out to him. But so far, since OTAs have started, Drake Kirkpatrick came out with the injury. I touched on that. But what I think that this actually does is it gives the younger corners, and honestly, I think it might actually bode well for Darqueze Dennard more so than William Jackson III, which I originally wanted it to be for William Jackson III, but it seems like Darqueze Dennard is going to be the guy that's going to get a chance. That it'll basically be an opportunity for the younger guys. You got a guy like Kivari Russell that's sitting there. To me, I think that he deserves to get some experience during this preseason. William Jackson III, like I said, but I think Darqueze Dennard has every opportunity now to prove that he can play on the outside. And I think the combination of, not knowing whether Dre will be ready for the start of the season, plus Pac-Man's injury, I think that bodes well for the younger corners. So that'll be interesting to see how they kind of take care of that and handle those things going forward. And it'll be interesting to see how Darqueze Dennard does. Obviously, the Bengals have renewed his they picked up his extension for next year. So obviously something's going on there where they think that Darqueze Dennard will have a role. Obviously, He's played in the slot and really hasn't been great there. I'd argue that Josh Shaw is a better slot corner than him. So we'll get to see. I actually went to bat for the guy last year around this time with my boy Pedram. He's a Steelers fan. And he kind of questioned me about Darqueze Dennard and whether or not I considered him a bust. And, at the time I was saying no, but, after last year, I kind of am to the point where I'm leaning towards him being a bust. So to me, I feel like this is the last, I guess, effort for him to show that he's, somewhat decent. So I think with Dre's injury and everything, I think that it's going to open up nothing but opportunities for our secondary, Kivari Russell. Like, I really like this guy. I was talking to him about him with Prime last year. He was a guy that was pretty high on there, and immediately when he got cut, I kind of tweeted out that I wouldn't be surprised to see them pick him up, and then within like a day or something, the Bengals ended up picking him up. He's a guy that kind of, in a sense, reminds me of Tory James. Tory James, for you guys that have been fans for the longest, just remember the fact that Tory James was like that ball hawk corner. And for a while, I thought it would actually be Drake Kirkpatrick that would kind of be that guy. But the Bengals are kind of missing that guy, the guy that's good at grabbing interceptions and things of that nature. So it'll be interesting to see how much he actually plays. And William Jackson III, it'll be interesting to see where he's at this year, especially with him not even playing last year, basically. He is another guy that, will have opportunities. So moving along, we're getting our look at the offensive line, and we see Cedric Ogbuehi out there, and so far so good. Obviously Ced has a chip on his shoulder and has a point to prove this year. So, I don't really wish bad on any of our players. So I hope that he does, get his act together. And I think he's shown initiative this offseason, whether it's training and, using other techniques in order to get better and effectively block the bull rush. Those are things that he's doing, and he's definitely taking ownership over some of his play for last season. So I think that that's pretty interesting to see. And I think the jury is still out on Andre Smith right now for the guard position, but honestly, it's like way too early. Like, we won't know exactly how Andre is up until, maybe the third preseason game to see how he's kind of getting used to things. You got to think about it. This is a guy that's played tackle basically his entire career. Even in college. So, we're just going to have to be patient with him and hope that he's able to do great things there. I think that he will be. But yeah, we're moving on into a renaissance period, and I think another thing that kind of goes overlooked, just touching on the rest of the line, Clint Boling kind of struggled last year. I'm one of the few people that kind of critique him as well, but he's got a lot to prove to me as well this year coming up. And then when you look at Jake Fisher, I'm not completely sold on him either. The fact that he was better than Ogbuehi last year at the right tackle position really didn't say much to me. Honestly, I think Eric Winston played better than both of them. But obviously, he's going to have to step his game up too. So hopefully both of those guys get their act together and this Bengals line comes together. So other than that, I'll just touch on some other things. Obviously, like, the media was there for the first day, so a lot of stories came out, and I was listening to another podcast. You guys are definitely probably familiar with it because, like you guys, I'm a diehard Bengals fan. I listen to all of the podcasts, and I'm not ashamed to say it. I don't do this for any kind of media outlet or anything like that, but I listen to Locked On Bengals. I listen to the BVP. That's one of my favorites. I also listen to the Orange Insider too with the Cincy Jungle folks. So I listen to them all, man. I'm a Bengals fanatic, so I definitely listen to them all. And I don't always agree with James Rapien. He definitely does a pretty decent job. I'll give him his respects as far as bringing you guys content, and that's what I like to see with any podcast is let's just make sure that the fans win. But one thing that I heard James talk about yesterday, he talked about no, actually I think it was today. Today is Thursday, so I think he did a podcast about Cody Core. And I get what he's saying as far as it's almost senile to think that Cody Core has a higher ceiling or or whatever it was. It was something that he has more potential or something like that than John Ross would. I don't think that the fan was saying that he was essentially better than John Ross, but he was saying that he had a high ceiling, and the Bengals could have picked O.J. Howard over him. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with the Bengals passing on John Ross, because initially I didn't like the pick, but thinking about it all together, given the circumstances and the position and all of that, obviously O.J. Howard would have been a reach there, because obviously teams behind the Bengals didn't really have him on their radar. And I mean, there's no telling how many teams actually had John Ross on their radar, but I would like to think that more teams had John Ross on their radar than O.J. Howard. But getting back to the point, he kind of downplayed Cody Core, and I just didn't agree with that. I think Cody Core was a really good player last year. I mean, the guy, in my opinion, didn't play enough. I think that was one of the biggest mistakes of last season, is that Core should have gotten more snaps than he actually did. You were giving snaps to guys like James Wright and all kind of other guys, but obviously Cody Core should have been getting some snaps, bro. And I mean, I understand, he's a 6th round pick and everything like that, but at the end of the day, that Ravens game, that dude turned up, and I think he had 84 receiving yards. I don't know how many catches it was, 5 or 6 catches, but dude took off in that game. And this wasn't against like the second team. This was against the entire first team Ravens defense. So, Cody Core, for being a guy that was a 6th round pick, to get thrown on the field as a rookie, he played in Laquan Treadwell's shadow, but what did Laquan Treadwell do last year? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, like, Cody Core either outperformed Laquan Treadwell in less games last year than Treadwell was, and honestly, his career isn't really looking promising, man, because they just signed Michael Floyd. So I don't know what's going on over that way, but just because somebody played in another player's shadow does not mean that they're not a good player. A lot of guys go under the radar, and I mean, he's definitely right. Like, nobody really knew much about Cody Core until we drafted him, and I mean, that's true, that's fair. I actually knew who he was just from doing Prime, just seeing the name and everything like that. He has kind of a unique name, but I didn't look up film on the guy or anything, but just because the guy, played in somebody's shadow, that doesn't necessarily always mean that they're not going to translate to the league, because, this is probably not the best comparison, but a lot of people, when Mike Evans came out, said that, Johnny Manziel made Mike Evans look good, and it was a reach for the Bucs to pick him as high as they did, and now look at it. Now it looks like Mike Evans made Johnny Manziel look better than he was. So, just because somebody isn't as good in college, I mean, there's countless guys where they were overshadowed. I mean, you talk about James Wright, Jarvis Landry. There's a lot of guys that were overshadowed by other guys in college. So, that doesn't necessarily mean that at the pro level that, things will change. But I think that he should have given Cody Core a little bit more credit. That's all I'm saying. Cody Core, for being a 6th rounder, coming in, never playing with Andy before, never learning the NFL offense before, to come in for 5 games and, record about 200 yards and, do the things that he did. I mean, he came into his own that last game. So, I think Cody Core is definitely if I had to say the chances of him making the roster, I think it would be 70%. With that being said, the Bengals are going to be in a weird predicament this year in terms of their kick return, and that's what I want to talk about too. So, you guys know, I mean, I don't mean to come off as a Alex Erickson hater, because you can go back to like my pods last year, and I was like raving the guy up. I love him. I think that he's, possibly comparable to Julian Edelman. But this is my thing, right? This team is loaded this year. I'm glad to say that. I'm glad that we're back to the point where, you have to try to figure out exactly how to, guess your 53 or, your 90 or whatever it is, because they are loaded. And this is my thing. I don't think that the Bengals need to keep 7 receivers. I would keep Cody Core over Alex Erickson, and I'll tell you why. Alex Erickson is a great kickoff returner, right? I don't believe that he took any of them back for a touchdown. Second, the NFL has basically almost essentially eliminated the possibility of kickoff returns, or they basically have taken them out of the game. Teams had to use special techniques just for guys to be able to return the ball. Third, although he's a great kick returner, he's not essentially a top punt returner. And me and my guys, we were talking about it earlier, and I think he was number 2 or number 1 in the league in return yards, but in punt return yards, he was like 11th, right? And this is my thing. I know a lot of people, and I've talked about it a lot on Reddit and everything, on Bengals Reddit. Why would you pick John Ross if you weren't going to play him or put him back there on punt return? You got a guy that can run a 4.2. I mean, we looked at last year. You look at a guy like Tyreek Hill. What kind of impact that can have? That's game changing. And it's just the thing always that people say is, oh, well, he's going to get hurt. Okay, that's true. That's valid. That's true. But you can get hurt in any aspect of football, whether you're in practice, whether you're like Drake Kirkpatrick and you're having a freak accident. I mean, you can get hit. You can get hit and hurt on any play. It's part of the game. It comes with the territory. So you see teams like the Steelers put AB back there. When Deshaun Jackson was on the Eagles and a little bit of his time on the Redskins, they put him back there. Why not? Like, if you got the keys to the Lambo, why not drive it? Why not push the doors up? Do something. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, you got a guy like John Ross that can return kicks. I think that he would be more so better suited for punts. But you have other guys too, like Brandon Wilson. You traded up, from the 6th round to grab the guy. Is he not going to make the team? I don't see that happening either. You also got a guy in Joe Mixon who can also return kicks. So you have options there. Giovanni Bernard. I mean, obviously we probably wouldn't want to do it with him coming off an ACL, but you have options there. That's all I'm saying. And I don't think that it's important for us to keep a guy that's solely, for the most part. Now, mind you, I did my research too. You guys know I do my numbers. Dude played like 2% of the snaps at receiver last year, and that's with AJ Green being out of the lineup. So if you were to say, would I rather keep a reserve defensive lineman or, maybe another linebacker, 2 places where we were very weak at and not as strong at. For Alex Erickson, I'm sorry. I can't do it. I just can't do it. I hope that there's a way, and honestly, it's way too early to be able to tell because you don't know what's going to happen with injuries. It happens all the time. So, I'm just not on the whole Erickson is not expendable bandwagon, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, if it came down to him and Cody Core, I'm taking Cody Core. I mean, you're talking about a guy in Cody Core last year that had, 6 receptions, 84 yards against the Ravens. Are you really going to cut him for a kick returner? And, I mean, that's just what it all really comes down to. But this weekend, man, I got some treats for you guys. We'll go ahead and start working on that next episode of Game of Stripes. We'll probably be taking on the Cowboys next. So stay tuned for that. I actually did the first live stream. I had so much fun doing that. I'm bringing it back with the live stream. So stay tuned. And if you don't subscribe, you won't get the notification knowing that I'm live streaming the actual Game of Stripes on YouTube. So make sure you check that out because that game last week, oh my God. If y'all didn't watch that, and I tried to prove it to y'all, I do not control these games. And it was funny because the last game at the end essentially ended like it was almost like a real Bengals game. It was like a false start on Cedric Ogbuehi, some kind of penalty on the kick return. The only thing that wasn't real is that Marvin Lewis would have had 3 timeouts at the end of the game, bro. That's just not happening. But yeah, we'll be doing that. So make sure you subscribe, because if you don't subscribe to my YouTube channel, that's New Stripe City. That's New Stripe City. If you don't subscribe to that, you won't get the notification knowing, and then you'll have to catch it after the fact. And it's just cool, man. It was I actually have to give credit to Brandon Seaman. Brandon Seaman recommended that I do that. I want to say a couple weeks ago, and I honestly just didn't know that I had the capability to do that. I was just like, how is it gonna work and everything? But it's actually pretty easy. So shout out to Brandon Seaman for that, man. And I definitely had that Cowboys game coming for you next. And I also threw up another video on how you guys can make some of the Bengals draft class members. So I have some ratings over there. If you guys want to take them, you can. A couple years ago, I used to actually do Madden rosters, and I created like my own little formula for it. And I try to make them as accurate as possible. Now, mind you, in my opinion, some of the ratings on Madden that they have for our players, perfect, aren't necessarily realistic. But I just kind of put my own gauge on it, not trying to hype them up too much. But yeah, make sure you check that out. If you didn't check out the Patriots one, check that out. And yeah, this weekend we have hopefully Larry Black coming on. I have some other stuff going on for you guys. And we're also working on that top 5 running backs. That Bengals running backs list is definitely coming too. So, just make sure that you subscribe to YouTube, to the podcast, and everything, because we'll be delivering this content to you, because we're for the diehards, man. That's what we do. So as usual, I leave you guys with a who day, all day, every day, and especially on Sunday.
Always business, never personal. Here's the 3rd and 7, and the carry goes down the field, and it's caught and breathes in for the touchdown.
Things are like that, so death, taxes, and 85 will always go.